Narduzzi has a lot invested in Michigan State. I know all his players love Coach Narduzzi. At Pitt, I knew all the players when he was at Michigan State loved playing for Pat Narduzzi. He's a little more outgoing than Coach D'Antonio. I think he's got a little bit more fun in him, I guess.
So is that couch over there? It's a little more outgoing.
But that was his style, bro. At least, you know what? With Mark D'Antonio, at least it was consistent.
Yeah, it was.
It was consistent. He was consistently angry, But that's the thing, though, too.
Curmudgeon.
And here's the thing, though. I was curmudgeon as a player. I was.
Look at all the personality.
Well, tell the people what curmudgeon means.
You were not curmudgeon as a player. You were, when the Lions lost, get to Spielman's locker first.
Exactly.
It's going to be really good.
It's like I wanted to, yeah.
And that was never Mark D'Antonio. Never. And that's fine. You don't have to be that way. I will say, I think Luke Fickell is the grand slam hire for Michigan State because there's an opportunity right now to recruit Ohio.
Yeah.
Because Harbaugh's not recruiting Ohio, and Ryan Day's really not recruiting Ohio to the level that Jim Tressel did and Ohio State coaches have over the years. Ryan Day, and I'm not saying he's making the wrong decision. I'm just saying if you can go out and get national 5-stars, I understand. I'm not going to say I agree with it, but I understand why they do it rather than take 4 stars from Ohio. But there are really good football players from the state of Ohio who, if Ohio State's not offering them, and they're not, and I'm not, again, it's not a mistake, it's just, it's the reality, Luke Fickell can get those guys and get them to Michigan State, and that can be a very productive way for a Michigan State program to be relevant, like it's been relevant under Mark D'Antonio.
Why, in recruiting, why Luke would have the edge over Narduzzi is because Luke is a name in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And anybody that follows college football understands that Cincinnati is a hotbed of talent with all the parochial schools down there,
yeah,
and the athletes in all the city schools and the athletes in the parochial schools. They just have great football in Cincinnati because kids go from all over the place, to Boston College, to Notre Dame, everywhere. I mean, every time I'm in the NFL, I'm with Tom Brenneman, right? Tom Brenneman is Mr. Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And all that's a natty boy. That's a natty boy. That's a natty. Every week in the NFL.
Yeah.
So Luke has that name. So if I'm Michigan State, I'm looking at that and saying, well, if I want Luke Fickell, I know this. I know his name in the state of Ohio, and I know that he can recruit in the Cincinnati area plus the whole state of Ohio. And to your point, Ohio State's not taking them all. Ohio State's only taking the best out of the best in the state of Ohio, and there are many good football players in the state of Ohio. Luke can go in there and beat Jim Harbaugh. He can go in there and beat this guy for that guy. And I think Pat, though, here's the thing. If I'm arguing for Pat and I'm in that room and we're discussing coaches, Pat obviously is from Youngstown, Ohio, so Northeast Ohio. So Pat has ties in Ohio. So both those guys, I think if I had my choice, if I were at Michigan State making this decision, and I would line up and order the coaches that I would want, Luke Fickell, number 1, Narduzzi, number 2, and it's a close 2. It's a close 2, and Shermer, number 3. I wouldn't even talk to any other guys. I wouldn't talk to any other guys because when you look at those 3 guys, we always talk about this, that is a fit, man. It fits perfectly.
Yeah, Narduzzi's got, you've got a small sample size with Luke compared to Narduzzi. He's been at Pitt longer. I think Narduzzi's been in a very winnable league, and he hasn't won it. And he hasn't finished in the top 25. And now he's scared the bejeebers out of Clemson a couple times and beat them once, so he can do it. But I think Luke is a higher upside, and I would go with Luke over Narduzzi, and I wouldn't even look at Shermer. I'd go completely outside. If I can't get Narduzzi or Luke, who both are Luke went to Cincinnati. D'Antonio came from Cincinnati, worked under Dino at Ohio State when Dino was the defensive coordinator in 02, 03. Fickell is the perfect choice.
Right.
He maintains the culture. The good part of the culture up there. Narduzzi, same, but I think Luke's I just think Luke has a higher upside. Beyond that, I go way opposite. I go Brian Harsin, Boise State. I go offensive guy. I go somebody from outside.
How did that work when you went John L?
Well, that didn't. I don't. I'm not saying go John L. I
Well,
mean,
that was
Brian
going
Harson's-
way opposite. That was
well,
high flying offense.
It was, but John L's a little out there. Crazy town. Don't go to Crazy Town to get your coach. Brian Harson's been a winner at Boise State. Big winner at Boise State. So I'm just saying. Now, here's how you mentioned a key word earlier in this podcast about Brian Hartline. You said Brian Hartline doesn't have or may not have what?
Leverage.
Luke Fickell has leverage.
Yes, he does.
So if I'm Luke, I liken the Michigan State situation right now, early February, with Mark D'Antonio resigning, not at an optimum point on the calendar, with the unknown about the lawsuit and the NCAA and la la la. If sometimes you walk in a building and you go, man, that's a funny smell. What is that smell? And it's not like driving you crazy, and it's not like you can't exist in the place, but you're like, find it. And then you wander around, the smell gets stronger and stronger, and you find the smell. Maybe you open up a closet, and you're like, whoa! That's the Michigan State job right now. There's like this hint, this whiff of, I don't know, that doesn't smell right, but they don't know where the real, or if there's a real stinky mess in there. So if I'm Luke Fickell and I go in there, I'm like, all right, if we get a year probation, I get, for every year probation we get, or for every X number of scholarships we get taken away, I get 2 years added to my contract, or I get X number of dollars,
Absolutely.
I'm like, I ain't going in here with this little stinky bit and finding out later I got a huge mess to clean up.
Right. I agree with you. That's why I did say that before anybody takes that job, they need to educate themselves on the situation, what's coming.
But I don't think they can. I don't think you can know right now. You can't know. NCAA investigations take time, and
like
you don't
you
have
said,
time.
you can put conditions on it.
Absolutely. That's the only way to protect yourself.
And a good agent and a good negotiator will do that. And that is leverage that you can use in your contract. That's one thing that I would absolutely advise. And if I were in that position, I would say, hey, if we go on probation, that's a year added to my contract. If I lose 10 scholarships, that's a year added to my contract.
I'd add more than that. It'd be more than that, because it takes more than a year to dig out from 1 year probation or 5 scholarships.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I do think, though, whoever's the coach, we will see something we haven't seen in Michigan State in a couple years, and that would be offense.
Yes.
Offense.
That's right. But
it's not offensive.
We buried the lead on this a little bit. I did. My bad. I wrote up for SI.com that it's a little bit amazing that Mark D'Antonio was Jim Tressel is Mark D'Antonio's mentor. This guy he patterned his coaching career, coaching style after.
Mm-hmm.
And there's similarities in Dino's departure and Tress's departure. Tress's was in May, not ideal time. Dino's day before signing day, not ideal. And the package ties up in a nice tidy bow in that the interim coach at Michigan State is Mike Tressel, who is Jim Tressel's nephew, the son of Dick Tressel.
Correct.
Yeah, so Mike Tressel's been with Mark D'Antonio since Cincinnati, so like 17 years.
And is the co-defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I remember when he went to Cincinnati, he came from Ohio State. He was here, GA, he was run around.
He's the interim head coach.
Do the grunt work. He's the interim coach right now. And he might end up with it for a little while. They might go interim for a year. If Narduzzi and Fickell say no, he might get it for a year. And then you get a year to evaluate him.
Your tryout.
But Mike, yeah. So there's a Tressel in the coaching tree, and he's good for him. He's come up through the ranks. He's progressed. He's defensive coordinator, and can't argue their defense has been good.
Youngstown State job is open.
That's right. Bo Pelini off to LSU. The Youngstown State job's still open. They haven't filled that.
No, not yet.
Well, there's Mike Tressel. Mike Tressel would be perfect for that.
Well, the problem is Mike probably makes. I'm just guessing. A defensive coordinator in the Big Ten average.
He's well over $500,000.
Yeah,
right at $500,000.
Well, I would say close to $700,000 or $800,000.
Yeah.
At Youngstown State as a head coach, you probably make $200,000 to $230,000.
Is that all? Really?
Yes. I do think there's a guy to keep your eye on at Youngstown State if anybody's interested. I mean, this is only because it ties into the story. Is Mike Zordich. I don't know if you remember Mike Zordich.
Notre Dame?
Yeah, and from Youngstown, and is a defensive back coach, I believe, at Michigan now. So it's a chance for him to escape Michigan.
And Zordich.
And Zordich played in the NFL, and Zordich knows Tressel. It'd be a good young guy. It'd be a good first job, and it'd be a chance for Mike Zordich to probably advance his playing career. Maybe Brian Hartline. I'll start that. Brian Hartline in Youngstown State.
Well, it must be that Mike Tressel doesn't want the Youngstown State job because it's been open long enough that if Uncle Jim was going to be able to get Mike to come and take it, I would think he would have taken it already.
Again, I don't think it's...
Money-wise, doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, money-wise.
Yeah. Well, Bo Pelini lost his job at Nebraska and needed a job, so any job is better than no job.
Bo was also getting paid
by Nebraska. Yeah, that's true.
So that
Bo looked at it as an avenue to get back in, become a head coach somewhere else. And I think Bo didn't do a terrible job at Nebraska. They haven't been as good at Nebraska since he left as they were when he was there. So, so lots of Ohio State ties to the whole Michigan State thing, and we'll see how that unfolds and maybe have details for you on Friday, as I'm sure more will come about or come to light on whether Luke Fickell wants it or doesn't want it. We have a lot of emails and a lot of reviews. So let's go through the Baker Mayfield story from the Super Bowl just quickly because we wanted to mention it.
Right.
He did a thing with ESPN and Rex Ryan.
Yes.
Right? Who Rex Ryan criticized him during the season, and if Baker, he claps back at everybody. He's like Trump. Trump could walk past a house and be 3 blocks away, and the dog would bark, and Trump would go back and bark at the dog. And Baker's that way. So Baker to Rex Ryan said of his year where he didn't play well and was always investing in things that have nothing to do with winning, he said, "It's a humbling experience. It's a different ballgame. I mean, let's be honest. I put my foot in my mouth a lot this past year, and I'm going to internalize that, and I think that's the way I need to handle it." As for being chip on the shoulder guy, he says, "I've always had a chip on my shoulder, but I've always played with an edge. It didn't come around to people noticing it until the cameras were all around, till it was a big deal where I was getting the spotlight and people made a big deal of that. I just have to be me. I have to continue to do that, but I don't need to reply to the stuff on the outside. So I need to internalize that and motivate everyone else around me."
So I remember sending you a tweet
Mm-hmm.
About how Kirk Cousins, who was getting ripped this year, how he responded. And I asked you, do you think Baker would respond like this? And you said no, because a professional quarterback doesn't respond like that. You remember that?
Like Baker, yeah.
And so for me, that's what I've been saying all along, right?
The interview was Kirk Cousins on the Dan Patrick Show. This is how the text started. I thought, well, Rick's your brother in the Vikings, and maybe you want to hear Kirk Cousins. So I'm like, hey, Spiels, Kirk Cousins coming up on the Dan Patrick Show. And you go, he doesn't say anything. In other words, I'm not going to listen because he's boring. And
I could give you the answers, correct?
Yeah, he said he doesn't say anything. And I said, just like a professional quarterback should.
I think Baker, I hope that's sincere. I think he's been humble. Because
I heard some good and I heard some in there.
Well, I think there's a little bit of, I get the message. All right, I've had enough. I'm going to get it. I understand it. Enough. Let's stop talking about it. I know my shortcoming. And with a guy, believe me, I played with a chip on my shoulder. He doesn't need to answer everybody, especially at that position.
Mm-hmm.
What he needs to do, and it sounds like this is the first step. And I talked about this when I did Dustin Fox's show and with the other guy.
92.3 The Fan with Adam McBull in Cleveland.
Okay, and we talked about this, and I said, look, Baker Mayfield can carry that chip and that edge on his shoulder. He just doesn't need to tell everybody about it. Just let your play do the talking. That's all you have to do. You don't need to pick a fight with everybody because you're not going to win because everybody's going to pick a fight with you.
Yeah.
Being a starting quarterback is a lot like being the president of the United States. You're going to get criticized no matter what you do.
Or being the host of a podcast.
Or being a host of a podcast. You can't answer every single critic. You used to answer every single critic. Like when you first started doing radio, it's the same thing. You had to respond to everybody that criticized you.
I had to be right. I had to not only respond, I had to be right. And I had to
had to make an argument of being right. And how much energy did you waste? Seriously, how much mental energy did you waste in trying to be right all the time? You can't do it.
You can't. Nope.
And you can't do it at a quarterback level of the National Football League because you're not going to win. And the only thing you're going to do is burn yourself out. You can still be yourself. you can still play with that chip on your shoulder. You can, and I do believe in internalizing things. If you need to let it all out, call your buddies and have a beer and let it all out, or whatever you do. But in the public's eye, you need to internalize it. And it's a cliche. It was a commercial. Never let them see you sweat. You can't let them see you sweat, because when they see you sweat, that is just like sharks to blood.
Yes, sir.
As a journalist, you know that.
Yeah.
As a fan, if you see on Twitter, if somebody sees they get under your skin, they just keep coming at you and they encourage you. You lived it.
Absolutely.
In a much smaller way. Not that you're smaller, but we were a local little radio show.
Yeah, no, it's just dumb. It's unproductive. It doesn't get you anywhere. State your position. You used to quote a scripture all the time. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. It's like, okay, sometimes we're not going to agree. I don't need to keep trying to convert you, and I don't need to, as you say, expend the mental energy on trying to convert you.
Exactly.
It's just no point. Which is a really good time for us to transition to the reviews and the emails. And I sense just from a glance, because when you pull up the reviews, you get the first like 3 sentences of them. So I think there's going to be a theme to this today, and I understand the theme. So let's do the first one here. This is from Studda. Tremendous podcast, great insight in sports, followed by a thoughtful, inspirational commentary on faith. Keep up the outstanding work, brothers. Thank you very much. 5-star. Then here's a 1-star, which we read them all. And Hansen. I just listened to Bruce Hooley discuss the Super Bowl halftime show. His main reason for disliking it was that it was Latino themed. He said football was American. I'll just read the podcast, then we'll respond. He said football was American. Why can't the halftime show be American? Translation, America is for old white men like me. Get this un-American Latino stuff off my TV. What a joke. Latino people are American too, Bruce. At your next Bible study, maybe look up the Good Samaritan story. Fair point. I don't believe what was my main objection to the halftime show? That it was Latino. I did say I needed subtitles to understand the song lyrics. And I did say there's nothing wrong with celebrating America, and I suggested we do occasionally do a country music halftime show, since country music is the most popular genre of music in America. But I said I get it, Latina music in Miami. But what was my main objection to the Super Bowl halftime show?
The sexual nature of it.
Thank you. Yes, my main objection to the Super Bowl halftime show was certainly not that it was Latin themed. It was that I thought it was inappropriate for viewers of all ages. So I would just say that. But you have a good point in there about tolerance in the fact that, all people are children of God and loved by God. And I hope that my actions and attitudes demonstrate that I 100% agree with that.
Okay.
All right. So here we put it out there. My thoughts on the Super Bowl were that it was inappropriate and, stripper themed and all this stuff. And we asked for emails to SpielmanandHooley.com, particularly from women, to tell us what you thought. Because my other objection to it was in the sexual nature of it was, I'm like, come on, that's not empowering to women. Like, that's not my daughters. I don't want my daughters looking at that, gaining the message that the way for me to be accepted is to flaunt my sexuality in that way.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I think how you raise your daughters, and your daughters aren't in the entertainment world.
One of them aspires to be.
Okay.
The one who's not athletic really aspires to
Then
be.
she's got to hold true to who she is, how she was raised, and what her standards are going to be. I think with J-Lo and Shakira, they might have a different view than you and I do on expressing sexuality. I think the NFL knew when you hire Shakira and J-Lo to do a performance, that's what their performance is going to be. And we have a right, just as people have a right here. If you don't agree with that halftime performance, then we have the right, hey, not watching it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a part of this. You have that choice in that decision. And I know that some people were very upset. Well, my kids couldn't watch a halftime show. Well, then that's a choice that you make.
Yeah.
Other people found it enjoyable. And it goes back to my point is that I I thought it was very sexual. I didn't look at it as sexual for some reason because I don't know. I just didn't see that. What I saw was just, this is just me. And I believe me, I am not kowtowing to anybody, but I just saw, wow, that's a pretty talented move. And, sure, those outfits are skimpy, but maybe I'm callous to that. I just didn't like, oh my gosh, that outfit was so skimpy. I said, man, 50 years old. I wonder what she's doing to train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I know you. Or
Shakira, 43, man, she's got abs. That was my mindset, right? And then I thought, like I talked to you about, I wonder if these entertainers, like football players, visualize their performance, and I wonder if the practice is like, or the rehearsal is like a practice, and is there a coach overseeing this? And there's a coordinator for dances. Is there an offensive coordinator or head coach for That's how I looked at it, and that's just my mindset. I didn't like the sexual part of it. Yeah, fine. Well, that's a little over the top, but it just kind of goes past me. Does that make sense?
That's great. Yes, I think it does. I think it defines your background. You brought it to that, and you're like, and I thought your points were interesting. I'd never thought about that, like the practices for it.
Yeah, that's the first.
I know you practice, but I figure it's just like you get out there and you wing it.
Yeah. I mean, I just wonder what it's like. I would like to see that practice, and
somebody stops it and goes, no.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
I did see a chorus line with Michael Douglas many years ago, and it gave me an appreciation of the effort that these people put into entertaining.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like, it's not something that I'm sitting there celebrating. Oh, take more clothes off. I just don't see it like that.
I think you're in a minority.
I think I am in a significant.
But that doesn't mean your points aren't valid or insightful.
Right.
So here's an email from Christy. She says, as a woman, I agree with Bruce. The Super Bowl halftime show was disgusting. I was so grateful my husband chose not to watch it. There was certainly a lot of thought and creativity poured into the show. However, I certainly thought it was degrading to women, not empowering. In all our creativity and artistic talent, can we not come up with a show that is encouraging for all? Probably not in this era, as Chris pointed out to me the other day. No, there's no way to do anything that's not offensive to somebody. I had a guy yesterday, a friend of mine, who we do not share at all the same political opinions. Which, yes, I have friends who don't share the same political opinions, which I'd encourage all of us to have. Yes. Okay? But we're friends. I really like this guy. I pray for this guy, and he's a good guy, talented guy. And he said, and he enlightened me. He said, to your point on female empowerment, he said to J-Lo and Shakira, and to many others, but particularly to those two performers, that performance does demonstrate their view of female empowerment. It's empowering for them as a 40-whatever-year-old and a 50-year-old to get out there and show that they can still do it and they still got it and la la la. It's empowering to them. He's like, it might not be empowering to you or your idea of what a female empowerment would be or what you want it to be for your daughters, but to them, it's empowering. I was like, that makes sense.
You know what? I guess that's how I feel. If you think about it, because what was my first thing was, man, I wonder what they're doing to train.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, and it's a good, and that's what you get. By the way, a good lesson there for all of us. That's what you get when you talk to people, as opposed to talking over people. You hear another person's point of view. You actually give that point of view some thought. Then you make a decision on whether I can use that information or not use that information, or is that information relevant or educational to me where I can look at it from a different point of view. So I thank your friend for that, because he helped me define my point better.
And I'll tell you who he is later, because you know him. So hopefully that's what that talking to people, not over people, is what brings us to our next email.
Okay.
So Matt emails the show.
I love the headline.
On Monday, and the headline on the email is, Bruce is an unevolved caveman. He says, it's refreshing to see how progressive Chris is with his opinions.
Oh, gosh. I've never in my life
been described that way.
Been described as progressive. I do have some progressive views, as you know, but not many.
He says, Hooley thinks J-Lo is un-American. However, hillbillies like Toby Keith are. I'm glad I don't live in your version of America. You can't watch a halftime show without having impure sexual thoughts. You're either just trying to come off as a great Christian or you have some warped, perverted feelings. I watch with my wife and daughter. I never once thought impure thoughts. Then again, I don't expose my faith to the world like you seem to do. It's possible to see a beautiful woman without having sexual thoughts. I love how Hooley loves to talk about his faith, and yet he is as spiteful as always. Perhaps you should show some humility. So I responded to Matt. I said, thanks for your email, Matt, and listening to the podcast. We will discuss your email on Wednesday's show. Appreciate the honest feedback. And then Matt emails me back yesterday. He says, when I sent it when I was hot and bothered watching all of the garbage Trump stuff and heard your podcast. Mm-hmm. I probably should have taken my advice and wrote the email and saved it until I chilled. Oh, well, I can't remember what I wrote, but I hope it wasn't too mean. Hashtag double negative. It was fine. That's fine. So I think that's an example of, hopefully, a gentle answer turns away wrath. Hopefully, Matt and I could have a conversation about it and disagree without being disagreeable.
Right. And
I don't think J-Lo's un-American at all. I think J-Lo is, my point is on J-Lo is,
story.
J-Lo is quintessentially American. What my dad fought in World War II for, what I just, to come to America and then to apply your cultural background and assimilate into American culture and abide by the American system of hard work and achievement and letting your talent. She's the quintessential American story. And I want to see that story continue. That's why we have men and women serving overseas, and those are the absolute American values I fight for and defend. And when I talk about America, that's the America I'm talking about. And I want to see that continue in all ways, shapes, and forms. Right. That's my view of the greatness of America, and it's what differentiates it from other countries.
I think where the mix-up comes is you weren't really criticizing J-Lo or Shakira because you knew what they are. That's their performers. And they're performers that are going to state their opinions and perform. And they have a right to do that. I think where the problem is that you have messages of commercials of the NFL of empowering women, which is great and fine, but then you have a mixed message of where do we have to do it by showing, all-female football team and how far we've come, right, in the commercial. Then we have what some people would say a halftime show that was totally sex, nothing else.
Yeah, it went back. It
goes back and forth. What do you want?
It glorified objectifying women and displaying their sexuality above everything else. And this is, again, in my opinion, that are attitudes that I thought in the Me Too era and everything we're trying to get away from.
Yeah.
So and I hope we're trying to get away from that.
But the whole point was you're not blaming Shakira
not at all.
Or J-Lo for the performance. You're just saying, what messages are we sending? What do you want here? Which direction are we going? And maybe we want everything. We can do it both ways. I don't know.
I said Sunday night we were at a Bible study / Super Bowl party. We turned the halftime show off because with J-Lo and Shakira, you know what you're getting. It's not like I turned it on and thought we're going to get, decorum and modesty. Right. I know what I'm getting. So I chose not to view it, but I knew you want to talk about it, so I watched it later on DVR.
And one more response to Matt, and I appreciate Matt sending that email.
Absolutely.
I expose my faith probably as much or more than Bruce, only because maybe I'm in the public eye just a little bit more, and we both will continue to expose our faith, Matt, but Bruce will not impose his faith on you, and I will never impose my faith on you. And that's not our job. It's your job to discern for yourself whether what we say is right or what is wrong and what you did, and you can have an opinion for it, and you can form your own opinion. But I can tell you that Bruce is not trying to impose anything on you. He's giving you an honest feeling, an emotion, a feedback from his experience. Just take the information, and I'm glad that he responded back to you because you two now are talking to each other as opposed to talking over each other.
look, I'm a big boy, and I fully know and own that I made my bed with many people years ago with my combativeness, and it was not godly, and I wish I could erase it. I cannot erase it. I can only try to be better. You referred to how I used to be on this podcast. It's 100% accurate. It was, you didn't even equate it as bad as it was at its worst, and it was bad at its worst. And so I understand it. Why people feel about me in many of the ways that they do, and I regret it. But you can't live with regret. I got today to do differently, to do better, and that's what I'm endeavoring to do. So I understand why I wouldn't get a second chance with many people, and I'm grateful for the second chance that I get with some people. Email from Todd. Gents, I have to report I did the research, and I can confirm that both the Super Bowl entertainers got into such great shape by walking and cycling 6,000 miles in the past year. Spiels, that's what you will look like by November. Holy cow. That's a great. Are you going to dress like Shakira and J-Lo when you come in here? You're going to have like a Zeke Elliott t-shirt with your abs exposed when you come out here into the hinterlands?
I know my role, and I know my style.
Okay.
That's just not me.
All right. Very good. Just Todd. Thank you, Todd. Now I know what to expect.
So
before, maybe we'll grab a before picture today.
Let me I want to ask you, what was the turning point? Because even, I hope you don't mind me asking this over the air.
You can ask me anything.
Even at the Zone, you were combative a little bit.
Yeah.
Is just losing a job?
It's humble. It's like God
the whole
saying,
humbling experience.
The whole humbling experience. I gave a speech in West Virginia last Thursday, and I said God has used job adversity in my life to take. Remember we talked about the spiritual chisel?
Mm-hmm.
Like bam, bam, bam. I'm going to knock that off of you. I'm a hardhead. I probably could have played like you in the NFL for years and never got a concussion. I got a hard head. I'm stubborn. And God has had to, okay, here we go. 3 years ago, I chiseled that off, and it's grown back, so I'm going to chisel it off again. The fact that job adversity makes me cry out and search, what am I doing? I'm searching for on a bunch of fronts. I'm searching for comfort. I'm searching for direction, what to do next. I'm repenting of my behavior that I think has perhaps contributed to why God needs to get my attention. So yeah, that's my thing, is when the Zone folded, all of a sudden I had to take, it was a jolt. It was life grabbing me by the lapels. It was a seminal moment in my life. And hey, I can't sit here and guarantee you if I find something that solves some of the concerns that I have financially, that I won't get lazy again. I hope 2-3 times now that this has happened, I've learned the lesson and ingrained the lesson, and I have the joy of the past year where, man, I love living this way. I love looking at people this way. I love having more patience. I love being more